You know that feeling, right? Where your attention just feels scattered, like you're pulled in a million directions, phone buzzing, emails piling up, the social media scroll just calling your name. It can honestly feel like getting any real focused work done is, I don't know, a thing of the past. Well, today we are diving deep into a book that really tackles this feeling head on. It's Cal Newport's Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World, which came out back in 2016. And Newport, well, he's a computer science professor, but he's also become this go-to voice on productivity.
Yeah, and his core idea is really powerful. Like, basically, in this world we live in, with all the distractions, being able to actually do deep, focused work, that's becoming super rare. And because it's rare, it's also incredibly valuable, like a superpower almost. So our mission today is to really unpack what he means by deep work, why it's so important not just for work, but maybe for feeling good too, and crucially, how you might start building more of it into your own life based on what's in the book.
I really like how he lays out the book, actually. It gives us a clear path for our conversation. Part one is all about the idea, what is this thing, deep work, and why should we even care? And then part two gets practical. It's called the rules, basically, how you actually do it day to day. So our goal here is to pull out the absolute essentials for you, kind of give you the core insights from this really influential book. Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. When Cal Newport uses the term deep work, what exactly are we talking about?
Right. It's the absolute cornerstone of the whole thing. Newport's definition is pretty precise. He says it's professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. So, think about someone writing a complex novel, or a coder deep in a tricky piece of software, or maybe a scientist trying to crack a really difficult problem. That's the kind of work. It demands everything you've got mentally without distractions.
Okay, distraction-free concentration, pushing your limits. And then he sets up this contrast with something else, shallow work, right? How does that fit in?
Yeah, exactly. Shallow work is basically, well, the opposite. He defines it as non-cognitively demanding logistical-style tasks, often performed while distracted. So this is all the stuff that tends to fill up our days, isn't it? Firing off quick emails, sitting in those endless status updates, mindlessly flicking through social media, just understanding that difference, being able to sort of label the type of work you're doing at any moment. That's like step one, a really crucial first step.
And this is where he really makes the case for why deep work isn't just, a nice thing to do if you have time, but actually essential now, especially in what people call the knowledge economy. He talks about two key abilities.
Yeah, this is super important. He argues that basically to thrive today, you need two core skills. First, the ability to pick up hard things fast, like learn complex stuff quickly. And second, the ability to produce work at a really high level, both in terms of the quality of what you create and how quickly you can do it. Elite level, he calls it. And deep work, well, that's the engine. That's what lets you learn faster, think deeper, and ultimately produce work that really matters.
Okay, so if it's that valuable, why is it becoming rarer? What's pushing back against it? What are the sort of forces working against us trying to do deep work?
Well, you just have to look around, right? The biggest culprit is probably the constant digital noise. Social media notifications, the email deluge, just the sheer amount of information screaming for our attention all the time. It fragments our focus. Then you've got things like open offices, which, let's be honest, can make finding quiet focus almost impossible sometimes. And there's also this cultural thing, isn't there? This idea that being busy, like constantly responding, always being available, is somehow a sign of productivity. It's often not. So all this stuff makes deep work really hard to come by, which paradoxically makes it even more valuable if you can manage it. And beyond just the career stuff, there's a real psychological payoff too. That feeling of being completely immersed in something challenging. It's deeply satisfying.
Fulfilling.
Even.
Yeah, that reminds me of a line from the book that really stuck with me. He says, "The ability to perform deep work is becoming increasingly rare at exactly the same time it is becoming increasingly valuable in our economy." It definitely makes you stop and think about where your attention, your most valuable asset, really is actually going. All right, so we've got the what and the why. Let's shift gears now. How do we actually do this? Let's get into Newport's 4 rules for making deep work happen. Rule number 1 is pretty straightforward, at least in name: work deeply. But, just deciding isn't enough, is it? How does he suggest we structure things to make it actually happen consistently?
Right. It's less about just gritting your teeth and trying harder, and more about building systems, rituals, and routines that actually support that kind of focus. He gets really practical here. Things like setting very specific start and end times for your deep work blocks. having dedicated places where you do deep work, places where you signal to yourself it's focus time, and really importantly, having super clear goals for what you want to achieve in that specific session. It takes the guesswork out of it, helps you just dive in.
And he doesn't just say do it, he offers different models, right? These depth philosophies, ways to fit it into different kinds of lives or jobs.
Yeah, which is helpful because one size doesn't fit all. He outlines 4 main styles. First is monastic. This is the extreme version, basically cutting out almost all shallow stuff. Think of like a writer going off to a cabin for months. Then there's bimodal. This is more like splitting your time, big chunks for deep work, maybe several days or weeks, then blocks for everything else. Academics sometimes work like this. Third is rhythmic, which is probably the most practical for many people. This just means making deep work a regular habit. Maybe it's, the first 90 minutes of every single workday, no exceptions. Building that rhythm. And finally, there's journalistic. This is about grabbing deep work opportunities whenever they pop up, kind of like a journalist on deadline. But he does warn that this one takes a lot of practice, a lot of mental discipline to switch modes that quickly.
Okay, that leads nicely into rule number 2, which honestly sounds a bit weird at first. Embrace boredom. What's that about? Training your mind to not be stimulated.
It is counterintuitive, isn't it? But the idea is actually pretty profound. It means don't immediately grab your phone or look for any distraction the second you feel a bit bored or have a moment of downtime. Instead of constantly needing new input, you intentionally let your mind just be. You practice being okay with not being entertained. By doing that, by tolerating boredom, you're actually strengthening your ability to focus. You're building up that concentration muscle even when you're not technically working.
Okay. Rule 3 is the one that often gets a lot of attention. Quit social media. He's pretty blunt about this one.
Oh, he definitely is. No pulling punches there. He pushes this idea he calls the craftsman approach. Basically, only use a tool if its positive impact on your core work or life clearly outweighs the negatives. His argument is that for many, maybe most people doing knowledge work, social media's constant shallow dopamine hits actively train your brain away from the capacity for deep focus. It fragments your attention. But it's fair to say this is the rule that gets the most pushback. Some people feel it's too extreme or unrealistic, especially if your job requires social media, think marketers, creators, community managers. So it's really about a very honest cost-benefit analysis for you.
Right, it's not necessarily a blanket delete everything for everyone, but a hard look at the value. Okay, and the last rule, number 4, drain the shallows. This sounds like actively fighting back against that shallow work we defined earlier.
Exactly. It's about being really intentional, almost ruthless, in minimizing the amount of time and energy that gets sucked up by those low-value, shallow tasks. You got to protect your deep work time. And it gives concrete ways to do this, things like planning out your entire workday, maybe hour by hour, so shallow stuff can't just expand to fill the time, learning to say no politely but firmly to meetings or requests that aren't essential, checking email way less often, maybe only at scheduled times, to break that reactive cycle. Even using things like email templates for common replies to save mental energy. It's all about reclaiming focus.
So looking back at the whole framework, the idea, the rules, what do you think are the biggest strengths of this book? Why has it resonated so much? It does feel like a breath of fresh air.
I think its biggest strength is that amazing balance it strikes. It's not just, here are 5 productivity tips. It digs deep into the philosophy, the why behind focus. But it also gives you concrete, actionable strategies. And it's backed up with the research and really interesting examples. He talks about historical figures like Carl Jung, Isaac Newton, but also modern folks like Jason Fried from Basecamp, people practicing digital minimalism. And honestly, the core message just feels more urgent every year, doesn't it? Plus, his writing is just very clear, very direct, no fluff. I love that quote. Clarity about what matters provides clarity about what does not. That sums it up well.
That clarity is powerful. But like any influential idea, it's not without its critics or, let's say, nuances. What are some common criticisms or limitations people point out about deep work?
Well, while the ideas are compelling, some argue the advice can feel a bit idealistic, maybe hard to implement fully depending on your job. If you're in a very client-facing role or maybe a more junior position, you might not have the autonomy to just block off hours or ignore emails or skip meetings. Your job might depend on being highly responsive. There's also a critique that it focuses very heavily on sort of cognitive or intellectual labor writing code, doing research, writing books. It doesn't spend as much time on jobs that involve significant emotional labor. Think about teachers, nurses, therapists, customer service folks. Their work requires a different kind of deep presence and engagement that isn't quite captured in the same way.
So wrapping things up, the big takeaway really is this. Deep work argues that focus isn't just like a work skill. It's becoming a fundamental life skill in our crazy, distracted world. Who should read it? Well, definitely students, researchers, writers, programmers, any professional really who feels like their focus is slipping and wants to produce better quality work. Anyone feeling overwhelmed, basically, who might find it tough. Maybe people in those super fast-paced, reactive jobs we mentioned, or frankly, anyone who isn't really willing to reconsider their relationship with digital tools.
Yeah, it really feels like in a time when everyone and everything is fighting for a piece of your attention, Newport's giving us a kind of roadmap, not just for getting ahead at work maybe, but for finding more meaning and satisfaction in what we do. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. As you go into your week, what's one specific distraction you could try to consciously drain, as Newport puts it? Or what's one tiny ritual, maybe just 30 minutes, you could try to carve out to start building that deep work muscle? It's worth thinking about.